I was just passing by my daughter's house. But when I saw my wife's silver SUV parked in her driveway, something inside me snapped awake. Funny how your gut knows what your heart refuses to see. I had no reason to stop. Elena had already told me she wasn't home. Just a routine call to ask if she and Brent wanted to grab dinner. Nothing unusual. She'd said she had late appointments with clients, and that Brent would be at home working. But the moment I saw that Lexus, Judith's pride and joy, waxed until it gleamed like chrome, I knew something didn't line up. That car was supposed to be parked in our garage, not sitting here like it belonged. I pulled over across the street and shut off the engine. The neighborhood was quiet in that well-groomed kind of way. Fresh mulch in the flower beds, mailboxes with clean paint, the soft hum of air conditioners behind closed windows, a place where everyone smiled politely, but paid too much attention. Judith once told me Marion Ridge was the kind of neighborhood where appearances mattered more than people. She said it with disdain, yet she made sure her diamonds caught the light every time she walked into brunch. I stepped out of the car, not entirely sure why. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was the way the sun caught that silver paint like a spotlight. I crossed the street, kept low by the hedge, and made my way along the side of the house. I wasn't thinking clearly, not yet. Just a slow, heavy pull in my chest, like gravity had turned personal. A faint breeze stirred the curtains of the slightly cracked living room window. And then I heard her voice. "When the old fool finally signs the papers, we'll have everything we planned for." Judith's voice. Smooth, almost amused. As if betrayal was a game she had already won. I froze. Inside, I could see her through the gap in the curtains, lounging on the cream-colored sectional like she owned the place, legs crossed, one manicured hand twirling the stem of a wine glass. Across from her, Brent leaned against the bookshelf, a manila folder resting beside him on the coffee table. He wore that smug, calculated expression I had grown to despise, the one that said he thought he was the smartest man in the room. "The timeline's perfect," Brent said. "File in June. Claim irreconcilable differences. With the new statutes, she'll be entitled to at least half. More, if we frame it right." Judith laughed then. That same laugh I used to think sounded like wind chimes on a summer porch. I couldn't move. My knees locked. My throat went dry. Every instinct screamed at me to storm in, to demand answers, to confront. But my hands reached instead for my phone. Years in business had taught me the value of evidence. I hit record. Brent's voice continued, clear as day. "The construction business alone is worth $12 million. Add in the rental properties, the lake house, the investments. You're looking at nearly $20 million in divisible assets. And he won't see it coming. Howard still thinks you're making dinner plans and listening to payroll problems." "I deserve it," Judith said. "I played the role for 25 years. I smiled at parties. I nodded through every dull story about subcontractors and permits. God, the man actually believes I love him." My hand shook, but I kept the phone steady. Every word burned like acid. They laughed again. Brent gestured toward the folder. "We've documented everything. Bank statements, valuations, titles, even offshore holdings he probably forgot about. He practically handed us the keys." A twig snapped under my foot. Judith's head turned sharply. Brent stiffened, eyes narrowing toward the window. "You hear that?" Judith asked, voice suddenly tight. "Probably just the neighbor's cat," Brent said after a pause, though he didn't sound convinced. "You're being paranoid." "Can you blame me?" she hissed. "If Howard discovers this, he won't." Brent said confidently. The man couldn't spot a setup if it wore a neon vest. By September, you'll be divorced, wealthy, and free to do whatever you want, with whoever you want. I pressed myself against the brick wall, heart pounding so loudly I thought it might give me away. My breath fogged in the cool spring air. The wind carried the scent of cut grass and deception. I stayed there, crouched like a criminal outside my own family's secret, until their voices lowered again. My phone continued recording, every second becoming a nail in the coffin of my marriage. When I finally crept back to my car 15 minutes later, the weight of those words settled like concrete on my chest. 25 years. A life built brick by brick, handshake by handshake. I'd given her everything. Paid for Elena's college, covered Brent's early career missteps, hosted every holiday in our home with the good china. And all the while, they'd been preparing to take it from me. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. My hands, these hands, had built the very world they were trying to carve up. The houses, the office tower downtown, the lake house Judith insisted we needed for retreats. I had poured myself into those projects while she poured herself into calculating the value of my labor. The recording still ran. I stopped it, saved the file, backed it up twice. Then I leaned my head against the wheel and tried not to cry. Not from pain, from humiliation. I hadn't just been betrayed. I'd been conned. The front door opened. I sat up. Judith emerged first, sunglasses perched on her head, purse swinging with casual elegance. Brent followed, adjusting his tie like he'd just come from court, not a planning session to dismantle my life. They didn't expect to see me. Judith's face paled. "Howard," she said, startled. Her voice went up half a pitch. "What are you doing here?" I kept my face neutral, my voice even. "Just finished a job site inspection nearby. Thought I'd stop by and see Elena." Brent stepped a little closer to her, the way a man shields what he thinks is his. "She's not home," Judith said quickly. I was helping Brent with some legal paperwork for a client." "Divorce law?" I asked lightly, watching Brent flinch. "Complex cases, I hear." Judith's smile faltered. "You know me. Always happy to help. I thought you had work until 6. Something about the Anderson project?" She blinked. "I left early. Headache." "Sorry to hear that." Brent tried to change the subject. "You caught us wrapping up. We'll get out of your hair." "Good timing," I said, glancing at my watch. I let them see the phone in my hand. Brent's eyes lingered on it too long. I opened the car door, paused. "Oh, Judith, Dr. Kelly's office called. Something about rescheduling your physical. Said it conflicted with your work hours." Her face blanked for a half second. "I'll call them later." "Probably a mix-up," I said. "These things happen." I got in, started the engine, watched them through the rearview mirror as I backed out. They stood frozen, then leaned close, whispering. The game had changed. They knew it. I knew it. We were all pretending this was normal, but nothing was anymore. Judith would come home with stories and reasons and new lies. Brent would double down on damage control. But they didn't know what I had. 43 minutes of audio. Crisp. Unmistakable. And a new version of me they'd never met. I pulled into traffic, hands steady on the wheel. I was done being the fool. I was done being the builder of someone else's kingdom. I sat in that driveway for 25 years, thinking I had everything. Turns out I was just the foundation for their greed. But foundations don't crack easily. I was the man who laid the stone. I was the man who knew where every pressure point was buried, and I was going to bring the whole thing down, one calculated step at a time. I sat frozen in the car, still recording. But something inside me had already started moving, cold, clear, and very much alive. They thought they were playing chess with a man who didn't know the board. The truth is, I'd spent 35 years negotiating with union reps, city councilmen, and vendors who'd sooner lie than breathe. You don't build a $12 million construction company from a second-hand truck and hand tools unless you know how to read the angles. And I'd read them all, every hesitation, every false smile, every polite deflection. It was all there in Brent's face, and Judith's posture. They didn't know what I knew, not yet. Judith used to joke that I was too humble for my own good, that I made money like a tycoon, and dressed like a man who didn't care if his jeans were 20 years old. Maybe she thought that was charming once, or maybe she just thought it made me easier to control. Back home, I walked through the front door like a man re-entering the battlefield. The house was spotless, of course. Judith had her standards. The floors were polished, the mantel perfectly staged. But it felt hollow now, like a showroom. Beautiful, but lifeless. Every framed photo, every vase, every throw pillow had been part of a lie. Her attention to detail hadn't been affection. It had been part of the performance. I went straight to the study. This room, wood-paneled, warm, full of the scent of old paper and polished oak, had been mine long before Brent entered our lives. I had designed it myself, right down to the shelving depth to fit every one of my tax records and blueprints. Judith never liked this room. She said it was too masculine. That was the point. I sat down at my desk, powered up my laptop, and opened the financial files Judith never bothered to learn how to access. Most of our records were digital now, but the original binders still lived on the shelves behind me. I didn't need them yet. What I needed was strategy. 43 minutes of audio was powerful, but revenge isn't about explosions. It's about erosion. Steady, unstoppable. One grain of sand at a time. I picked up the phone and called Marcus Webb. Marcus wasn't just my accountant. He was my friend. He'd handled Cole Development's books since the early days, back when I had 3 employees and still answered the phones myself. He answered on the 3rd ring. "You okay, Howard? You never call this late." "I need to talk," I said. "Privately. No assistance, no paper trail." There was a pause, then the quiet rustle of him closing his office door. "Go ahead. I want to lock down everything. Business, personal, assets. Offshore accounts, too." Another pause. "Judith? She and Brent have been planning something. I have proof." "Jesus. You want me to freeze access?" "Not yet. But I want the walls ready. We'll move fast when I say so." Marcus exhaled. "Send me the recording." I did. 10 minutes later, he called back, his voice tight with anger. "They've been planning this for months." "I know. I'll start restructuring immediately. By Monday, we can have new trusts filed, joint accounts neutralized, and asset protections in place." I leaned back, my chair creaking under the weight of decades. "Let me know what you need." The next call was to Mike Rodriguez. Mike and I met 10 years ago, back when he was still on the force, and I was overseeing the municipal building expansion. He was the one who flagged a shady subcontractor trying to inflate invoices. After he retired, I hired him for private jobs. Discreet ones. "You need eyes on Brent and Judith," I told him. "Find out where they meet, how often, what they're saying." "Anything off limits?" If they're speaking it in public or in their office, I want to hear it. You expecting them to panic? Soon. The next morning, I wore my best Navy suit, the one Judith said made me look like a bank CEO. I slipped on the reading glasses she always said made me look too old. Good. Let them think I was worn out. Let them relax. I walked into First National Bank at 10 o'clock sharp. Tom Bradley, the bank's president and my Saturday golf partner for the last 15 years, greeted me with his usual firm handshake. Everything all right, Howard? I need to review my accounts, all of them. I want to freeze every joint access point until further notice. He blinked. That's comprehensive. Any particular reason? Personal family matter, I said, and I want to keep it that way. I'd appreciate your discretion. Tom studied me for a moment. We weren't just business associates. We had history. He nodded slowly. Understood. Within 30 minutes, every shared account, checking, savings, credit lines, even our automatic utility bill pay, was locked down tighter than Fort Knox. Tom printed the forms, and I signed them one by one. Judith's going to notice, he warned quietly. I'm counting on it. By lunchtime, Judith did notice. I was standing in the framing yard at our new medical center site when my phone rang. I let it buzz twice before answering. Howard, she said, her voice shrill but trying to sound calm. Something's wrong with our accounts. My card was declined at the club. Then the bank said there's a hold. Do you know anything about this? Hold? I repeated innocently. That sounds serious. They said it was a security protocol, but I didn't initiate anything. Did you? Not that I recall, I said, surveying the new scaffolding as if we were discussing the weather. Maybe it's fraud prevention. These things happen. I was humiliated, she hissed. I couldn't even pay for my salad. I imagined her sitting at that white linen table, surrounded by her country club friends, face flushed with public embarrassment. For 25 years, she'd controlled the social calendar, the decor, the wine pairings. Now she couldn't buy her lunch. I'll call the bank and find out what's going on, I said smoothly. Let you know what I learn. Please do, she snapped, then hung up without another word. By the end of the day, I had 5 text messages from her and 2 missed calls, each more frantic than the last. Tom's secretary forwarded me a voicemail from Brent's office. He'd called, demanding answers, threatening legal action if the bank didn't restore his wife's rightful access. Tom responded professionally, informing him that all joint holders needed in-person verification with identification. Brent tried 3 times to access the joint savings account. He failed every time. I sat in my office that evening, watching the sun dip below the trees, casting long gold shadows across the desk. The bourbon Judith gave me on our 10th anniversary still sat, unopened, on the credenza. I poured myself a glass. To the man they thought was sleeping, to the man who built every brick, every contract, every future they thought they could steal, to the game they never realized I'd already started winning. I took a long sip. The burn was clean. Righteous. I picked up my phone and opened the bank app. Every account was secure. Every transaction was halted. Judith and Brent would wake tomorrow to a world where their grip on my life had slipped, and they'd only just begun to understand what that meant. She doesn't know it yet, but I just pulled the last dollar she'll ever spend in my name. Dad, is something wrong between you and Mom? Elena's voice was gentle, but the question hit like a hammer. I was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing out a coffee mug, when her call came in. The sun was just beginning to slide behind the trees, casting streaks of gold and amber across the window pane. For a moment, I forgot the world I was living in, but her voice pulled me right back. I let the faucet run and dried my hands before answering. What makes you ask? I kept my voice steady. She hesitated, just long enough to let me know she'd been holding this question for a while. It's just little things. You seem distant. Mom's acting anxious, and Brent's been asking me all these weird questions about your business, like how the ownership is structured, who controls what. I closed my eyes and breathed slowly. Fishing. Brent had been fishing through my daughter for information. That snake of a man. Using her trust, her love, her loyalty as a backdoor to my empire. But it wasn't just business he was after. He was building their legal narrative, trying to shape the battlefield before the first shot was fired. Probably just curiosity, I said, careful not to let anger slip into my tone. You know your mom. She likes feeling secure. Yeah, but this feels different. Elena paused again, and I pictured her sitting on the edge of her white sofa, the same one I helped her and Brent move in after their wedding. She was probably twirling her wedding band without realizing it, her mind ticking like it always did before a breakthrough. Dad, if something was really wrong, you'd tell me, right? Would I? Because the truth was jagged, ugly, and loud. Her mother, my wife, was plotting to rip our life apart. Her husband, my supposed son-in-law, was helping, and they were both planning to use Elena's profession, her license, her carefully earned credentials as a tool to frame me as the villain. Of course, I said. But nothing's wrong, just work stress. Okay, she replied, though her tone didn't carry belief. After we hung up, I stared at the phone in my hand for a long time. My reflection on the screen looked older than I remembered. A man who had built too much for too many people, only to realize too late that not everyone saw value in the same currency. Brent and Judith were already playing their part. Now, Elena was in the middle, and I needed to be sure she wasn't collateral damage. That night, I pulled out the recording again, not to hear Judith's cruelty or Brent's smug precision, but to prepare. Because soon I would have to show it to her. Let her make her own judgment. The next day, the air was thick with a spring rain that never quite came. I stood on the front porch, waiting for Elena's car to pull into the driveway. I'd asked her to come over, said I wanted to talk in person. She didn't hesitate. When she arrived, I saw the worry in her eyes the moment she stepped out. She was dressed for comfort. Jeans, a soft green sweater, sneakers worn thin at the heel. Her face was clean of makeup, her hair tied back loosely, but her walk was purposeful. She wasn't here to visit. She was here for answers. Inside, I led her to my office. Not the kitchen. Not the living room. My space. I need to ask you something first, I said once she sat down. Why now? Why come today? She looked down at her hands. Because I can't shake the feeling that something's off. And because last night Brent asked me if your offshore accounts were in your name only, or if they included joint designations. He said it was for estate planning, but he didn't look me in the eye when he said it. I sat across from her and slid my phone across the desk. What's this? Press play, I said. She hesitated, then did. For the next 43 minutes, my daughter sat in silence. She didn't blink much. She didn't ask questions. But her posture stiffened with each passing moment. Brent's voice played first, clinical, cold, calculating. Judith's laughter followed like a chorus of betrayal. By the time the line came, the man actually believes I love him. Elena's hand clenched into a fist. When it ended, she didn't speak immediately. Her mouth opened once, closed again, Then finally, she looked up at me, and the look in her eyes was no longer one of a child seeking reassurance. It was the gaze of a woman betrayed by her own family. "Dad," she whispered, "how long have you known?" "Since the day you told me you weren't home. When I drove past and saw the car, I knew something was wrong. Then I heard them. I recorded it." Her jaw tensed. "And since then? I've been protecting what I built, preparing." Elena stood up and began pacing. "She used me. They both did. Brent asked me things he pretended were academic. He even brought up emotional dependency and controlling behaviors, as if he was priming me to evaluate you." I nodded slowly. "Because that was the plan, to use your credentials, to turn your training into their weapon." She stopped. "I can't believe Mom, she said those things like she was describing a stranger, not you." I leaned forward. "You don't have to pick a side, Elena. I'm not asking you to turn against anyone. I just wanted you to know the truth." But she was already shaking her head. "No, you're wrong. I do have to pick a side. And I already have." She turned toward the door, then paused, shoulders square, voice steady. "I'm going home now, to talk to Brent." I opened my mouth to object, warn her not to reveal her knowledge yet, but she cut me off with a look. "I need to hear what he says when I already know the truth. I need to know who I married." That night, long after she left, I sat in the living room with every light off but one. The old floor lamp in the corner cast a dim glow across the hardwood floors. I could still hear her voice in my head. Not Elena the girl, but Elena the woman. Measured, composed, determined. My phone buzzed once around midnight. A message from Brielle, my niece. "Elena left Brent, said she'll call you tomorrow." I didn't respond right away. I just sat there, letting the silence fill the spaces Judith used to dominate with curated playlists and talk of vacation homes. This was what truth sounded like. The only sound in the house was the hum of the refrigerator and the steady beat of my own heart. I opened the drawer and set the phone with the recording on the table. "Let her press play," I whispered to no one. Elena pressed play. And for the first time, I saw my daughter's world shatter the way mine had. It wasn't just the words she heard. It was the voices. Her mother's, cruel and self-satisfied. Her husband's, cold and transactional. The things they said weren't just about me. They were about trust. About 25 years of family dinners, shared holidays, and long-held illusions. In less than an hour, I watched all of it collapse behind her eyes. There had been a time, not long ago, when I'd come home late from a site inspection and find her on the living room couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching those courtroom dramas she loved. Brent would be in the study, papers spread out, glasses perched on his nose like a man deeply committed to justice. They looked like a power couple. Now I saw it for what it was: smoke and polish. When the recording ended, Elena just sat there. I could see her knuckles whitening as she gripped the arm of the chair. Her breathing was slow, deliberate, like someone training herself not to cry. I stayed quiet. There was nothing I could say that would soften what she'd just heard. "She said it like it was a joke," Elena whispered. "Like loving you was some kind of performance she deserved a trophy for." "She did," I said quietly, "for a long time. I thought Brent admired you. He admired my bank accounts." She stood slowly, carefully, like a woman who wasn't sure whether her legs would hold. "I need to go." "Elena, I need to ask him," she said, voice brittle. "I need to look him in the eye and see what he says when he knows I already know." She left without another word. And I sat there, in the quiet, Waiting. The waiting was the worst part. The next evening, I heard her car pull into the driveway again. She didn't text first, just walked through the door like she used to when she was a teenager, unsure whether she was grounded or forgiven. She didn't look like someone who had just left her husband. She looked like someone who had walked away from a burning building with only the clothes on her back and her sense of self barely intact. "I left," she said. "I asked him if it was true. If he and Mom were planning all of this. He didn't even try to deny it." I sat down across from her. "What did he say?" "He said I wouldn't understand, that it wasn't personal, that Mom deserved better, and that if I were smart, I'd stay out of it." "And what did you say?" "I told him I don't live in a courtroom. I live in a family, and he destroyed it." She held herself together until that last sentence. Then her face cracked, just a little. "I'm so sorry, Dad. You didn't do this." "No, but I didn't see it coming. And that's what scares me the most, that I shared a bed with a man who thought you deserved to be broken." I reached across the table, took her hand. "You saw it now. That's what matters." But this wasn't over. That morning, I put on the Navy suit Judith used to compliment at weddings. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I needed to feel like a man who still had control over his story. Arthur Linwood met me on the courthouse steps. He was already sipping his coffee, his dark suit crisp as ever. "She filed this morning," he said. "Emergency restraining order, claiming financial abuse. Says you've been isolating her from assets and using control of money to punish her." I smiled faintly. "Perfect. She'll be in court this afternoon. Judge Hendricks drew the case." "Good. She's a no-nonsense type. Doesn't like theatrics." Even better. Inside the courthouse, everything felt colder than I remembered. Gray tile, pale lighting, the smell of industrial-strength floor cleaner, and damp paper files. But the cold didn't bother me. Judith arrived with her lawyer, a woman I'd seen once before at a charity auction. Aggressive, known for turning whispers into legal storms. Judith wore beige, soft colors, minimal makeup. She looked like a woman trying to disappear. She sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded delicately, as if she was a guest at her own victimhood. Arthur leaned close. "She looks nervous." "She should be." Judge Hendricks entered at exactly 1:30. Firm jaw. Steel gray hair pulled into a tight bun. A face that had probably heard every lie ever told between two people who once said, "I do." "Mrs. Keaton," the judge began, "you've filed an emergency restraining order citing financial intimidation and abuse. Would you like to elaborate?" Judith stood. Her voice was soft, just above a whisper. "Your Honor, I've been married to Mr. Keaton for 25 years. During that time, I've been financially dependent on him. Recently, without explanation, he froze all of our accounts. I have no access to funds for food, for gas, for basic needs. He's using money to punish me for exploring the possibility of divorce." "Do you feel threatened?" the judge asked. Judith's eyes shimmered, but no tears fell. "Yes, I feel cornered, powerless, afraid." "Of what, specifically?" She hesitated. "Of what he might do next." Arthur rose slowly. "Your Honor, we have audio evidence that directly contradicts Mrs. Keaton's claims. May we present it?" The judge gave a nod. Arthur connected his phone to the courtroom speaker, and Judith's voice filled the room. "When the old fool finally signs the papers, we'll have everything we planned for." Brent's voice followed. Calculating. Precise. Discussing joint accounts, asset division, offshore accounts. Judith didn't look up. The courtroom was silent. 25 minutes in, when she said, "God, the man actually believes I love him. I saw the judge's pen pause mid-sentence. 43 minutes later, Arthur disconnected the phone. The judge looked at Judith like a woman who had just watched someone drown their own credibility in public. "Mrs. Keaton," Judge Hendricks said, "do you have a response to this recording?" Judith opened her mouth, closed it. Her lawyer leaned over and whispered furiously, but Judith didn't move, didn't blink. Just sat there, staring at the table like it had betrayed her too. "Counsel," the judge said to Judith's attorney, "do you wish to proceed?" The lawyer stood. "Your Honor, I was not informed of this evidence prior to filing. I respectfully request to withdraw from representation." "Granted," the judge said. "Mrs. Keaton, your petition for emergency restraining order is denied with prejudice. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into possible perjury and abuse of court process." The gavel struck wood, just once. Judith still hadn't moved when the bailiff approached. Outside the courtroom, the spring breeze cut through the trees. I loosened my tie and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Arthur clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You just watched 25 years of deception unravel in 43 minutes. I've built skyscrapers with less tension." We walked toward the parking lot. Across the street, I saw a familiar figure waiting. Elena. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She just reached for my hand. Outside the courtroom, I saw Elena waiting. She didn't say anything. She just reached for my hand. She showed up in court wearing beige and fear. I showed up with the truth. That was the moment everything changed. But the fallout? That came in layers. Layers of silence, of whispers, of consequences nobody could outrun. The moment Judith walked out of that courtroom, stripped of her victimhood and her lawyer, the damage control began. But not by me. I didn't need to defend myself anymore. She was defending herself now, from everyone. The very next morning, I learned from Tom Bradley that Margaret's personal credit cards, ones I didn't even know she had, were now being declined at every store in town. She tried to return a handbag at the boutique on Main Street. They told her to take her return to the courthouse instead. Social circles close quickly when the truth becomes inconvenient. Word traveled fast, not just through our neighborhood, but through the country club, the church committee, the charity boards she used to chair with a manicured grip. Those women didn't call her back. They just moved on, one by one. By the weekend, the club had quietly removed her from the weekly luncheon list. Janet Crawford didn't return her text about the upcoming gala. And when she arrived at brunch that Saturday, Linda Patterson stood up, looked her in the eye, and walked away without a word. Judith didn't show up again after that. Meanwhile, I started making my rounds, not in bitterness, but in purpose. The Chamber of Commerce meeting that following Monday was cordial, if slightly stiff. I showed up early, shook hands like I always had, and waited until Jim Morrison brought it up with his usual Midwestern delicacy. "Howard, I heard there was some turbulence at home." "Turbulence," I repeated, swirling the coffee in my paper cup. "That's a good word for it." Jim nodded slowly. "If there's anything the chamber can do—" "There's nothing to fix," I said, not with anger but with finality. "Sometimes people show you who they really are." He understood. The others did too. Their questions stopped, but their support didn't. That week, Cole Construction was awarded a new civic contract, unanimous vote. The following day, I found out Brent had lost the Miller Industries account. $200,000 a year. Gone overnight. I didn't celebrate. I just got back to work. In the evenings, Elena came by. She stayed longer each time. Once to return a few things Brent had left behind. Another time to talk about therapy licensing requirements in a different state. And once just to sit with me, without speaking, while we watched an old western she used to love as a kid. "I'm thinking about starting over," she told me. "New practice. One that specializes in helping people spot manipulation, covert control, hidden emotional patterns." I smiled. "Sounds like you're uniquely qualified." She nodded. "Brent used my license to try and hurt you. I need to do something with that." "You already have," I said. "You walked away." She looked down at her hands. "I didn't see it until it was too late." "You saw it in time." She didn't answer, but she smiled. Later that week, Brielle came by my office with a manila folder thick with papers. "All signatures in place," she said, laying the folder on my desk. "Offshore protections are finalized. New trusts are active. Every asset is insulated. Nothing left in shared accounts. Nothing left for her to claim." I opened the folder and ran my fingers along the edge of the top sheet. Numbers, names, iron walls of legal clarity. "She'll get whatever she came into the marriage with," I said. Which wasn't much. Brielle sat across from me, legs crossed, hands folded. "You could take more. Force restitution. Damages." I shook my head. "I don't want more. I just want peace." At noon, a letter arrived from the Bar Association. Brent's license was officially suspended, pending permanent revocation. The hearing had concluded swiftly, aided by the 3 subcontractors who had come forward with documentation of unpaid work and fund mismanagement. I poured a glass of bourbon that night, not in celebration, in closure. Judith's name was now whispered in disappointment at places where her name used to command attention. Brent's law firm removed his name from the directory. Rumor had it he'd moved out of state, to Nebraska, of all places, working paralegal jobs for firms who didn't care about Google results. I didn't smile when I heard that, but I didn't feel sorry either. One evening, I sat by the window, watching the soft pink glow of sunset blur behind the trees. The same window Judith used to decorate with autumn wreaths and spring garlands. The window where I once stood with a cup of coffee and watched Elena ride her first bike down the driveway. That window didn't look the same anymore. It looked real. The doorbell rang around 7. I opened it to find Elena standing there with 2 boxes in her hands. "I emptied the rest of the guest room closet," she said. "His stuff. Thought maybe I'd drop it off here so he'd be forced to come pick it up himself." "Or I can burn it for you," I offered. She grinned. Tempting. We sat in the living room for an hour. No television, just the hum of the old floor fan and the creak of wood settling. Elena pulled a photograph from the box. Her wedding day. Brent in a tuxedo, me standing beside them, beaming. Judith's hand on my arm like we were still partners. She stared at it for a long time, then tore it in half. I didn't stop her. She set the photo down, her half still intact. Brent's was shredded. "That's the version I'm keeping," she said. "The one with the people who meant it." Outside, the sky darkened. The first fireflies of the season danced along the hedges. I thought of all the springs that came before this one, all the promises, all the illusions, and then I thought of what came next. I poured us each a cup of tea. We sat there in silence, but it wasn't the hollow kind anymore. It was the kind that follows honesty. It was the kind that feels like something new. I built this home with my hands. Now, I finally live in it, with both eyes open. They used to toast to me. Now they barely say my name. I stood at the edge of the country club lawn, beneath a white tent strung with fairy lights and self-importance. It was the annual memorial gala, something Judith and I had co-chaired every spring for almost a decade. Back then, people stopped me every few minutes to shake hands or share a whiskey-laced memory. Now they glanced, looked away, and whispered when they thought I wasn't listening. It didn't matter. I wasn't there for them. I was there to finish something. I sipped iced tea, the same way I always did when I didn't trust the room enough to drink bourbon. The air was thick with southern perfume and shallow smiles. That kind of atmosphere used to feel like success to me. Tonight, it felt like artifice. Brielle found me near the floral display, her black cocktail dress severe, her expression sharper than usual. "He's not coming," she said. "I didn't expect him to. I brought the documents anyway." "Good." Across the lawn, I spotted Elena at the silent auction table. She was speaking with a woman I didn't recognize, someone younger, probably another therapist. Her smile was real, softer, less guarded than it had been in months. Healing, I realized, doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just shows up in a half smile across a crowded room. A bell chimed, calling guests to the dining pavilion. I stayed where I was. And then I saw her. Judith. She walked in without apology, wearing a white suit, pearls at her neck, and a look on her face like none of this had ever touched her. But it had. I knew it. The whispering stopped as she passed, then resumed in louder waves. She still moved like the room belonged to her, but her shadow had grown thinner. Even from a distance, I could see the edge of something brittle in her posture. She spotted me, and for a moment she hesitated. Then she came over. "Howard," she said, voice measured. "Judith, you look good. You look determined." Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I suppose I am." "To salvage something?" I asked. "To remind myself I still can." I nodded, not with agreement, but with recognition. "Good luck with that." She leaned in slightly. "You won?" "I didn't know we were still playing." Judith looked past me, toward the auction table. Elena was laughing now, her hand on the shoulder of the woman beside her. "She hates me." "No, she's done with you." Judith's jaw tightened. "You think that's justice?" "No, I think it's what you earned." I didn't wait for her to respond. I walked away. Later that evening, under the amber light of the tent's chandelier, Brielle handed me the folder. "It's time." Inside were final papers: reassignment of trusts, transfer of property titles, formal disavowal of joint financial holdings. The only thing left untouched was the house Judith moved into last month, a 2-bedroom rental with a leaky porch swing and no garden. I signed everything. There, at the gala, where she once celebrated our victories with champagne, I signed away the last thing we still shared: our name on paper. Elena joined me minutes later. I saw her. "I know. She looks smaller." "She is." We left before the auction ended. I didn't want the painting or the trip to Napa or the golf retreat. I wanted my house, my old rocking chair, the warm hum of solitude. As we drove home, Elena reached into her purse and pulled out something wrapped in tissue. "I found this in one of Brent's old boxes," she said. "I thought you might want it." It was the Father's Day card she'd made in 4th grade. Blue crayon scrawled across a white fold. "To the best builder in the world." Inside, a drawing of our old backyard fort and a stick figure with a big smile, holding a hammer. "You kept this?" I asked. "I didn't. Mom did, but she didn't understand why it mattered." I smiled and set it on the dashboard. "I do." Back at the house, we sat on the porch while the wind rustled through the trees. Distant lawn mowers hummed, and a few neighbors walked by, offering polite waves. For once, I didn't feel like explaining anything to anyone. Elena stayed for hours. We talked about everything except Judith. At one point, she asked if she could reclaim her old room for a while, just until she figured out her next steps. I told her the sheets were already clean. When she went inside to get settled, I stayed out beneath the stars. I thought about the man I had been a year ago. A husband who trusted blindly. A father who assumed loyalty was a given. A man who mistook politeness for respect and silence for peace. I wasn't that man anymore. The court had done its part. The bank accounts were sealed, the contracts enforced. Brent was disbarred. Judith was publicly undone. The story was over, at least on paper. But I knew healing doesn't live in paperwork. It lives in quiet places, in rebuilt homes, in redeemed names, in the space between forgiveness and wisdom. The next morning, I woke early and made pancakes, Elena's favorite, with too much syrup and not enough nutritional value. We ate on the back porch. She told me about a therapist retreat in Colorado she might attend. I told her she should go. "You'll be okay?" she asked. "I already am." She paused. "Do you think Mom ever loved you?" "I think she loved what I gave her. And when I stopped giving, she stopped pretending." It didn't sting anymore. It just felt true. That afternoon, I planted tomatoes in the backyard. It was late in the season, but I figured they might still take. Sometimes even the soil deserves a second chance. That night, I walked through every room of the house, touching memories, letting some go, holding others close, the dining room where we hosted Christmas dinners, the den where Elena used to fall asleep during movies, the staircase I once painted in the middle of the night before her prom. When I reached the front door, I turned off the porch light, and I finally locked it behind me. Some names stay in ink. Others, I've learned, are better erased. There comes a point in every person's life when silence no longer means peace. It just means you've accepted being overlooked. For years, I had convinced myself that being a good husband, a good father, a good provider, meant swallowing my disappointments and smiling through the ache. I believed that if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, bent just enough, the people I loved would see me, cherish me, choose me. But life doesn't always reward kindness with kindness. And sometimes the people closest to you are the ones most willing to mistake your patience for weakness. I used to wake early just to make sure the house stayed warm in winter, just to make sure the coffee was ready before anyone else stirred. I took pride in that quiet care. In the patched-up gutters, the oil changes, the late-night grocery runs when someone forgot eggs. I thought it mattered. I thought love was built in those little things. And maybe it is, but only when those little things are seen. What I didn't see, what I refused to see, was that somewhere along the way, I stopped being a person in their eyes. I became a resource, a steady hand, a wallet with a pulse. And when I finally looked up from all that providing, I realized I was sitting at a dinner table where my name was only said when followed by a request. It wasn't one moment that broke me. It was the accumulation. The way Judith started finishing her sentences with silence, the way Brent smiled like every compliment was an investment, the way even Elena, my daughter, once so full of honesty, looked past me like I was a relic from a story she'd outgrown. Betrayal doesn't come like thunder. It comes like a slow leak, until everything drowns. But here's what they didn't expect. They didn't expect me to stop playing my part. They didn't expect me to listen closely when they thought I wasn't paying attention. They didn't expect me to use the very strength they relied on to protect myself instead. And they certainly didn't expect me to choose my dignity over their approval. The day I walked into that courtroom, I wasn't looking for revenge. I was reclaiming something they'd slowly tried to steal. My name, my truth, my worth. and I didn't need to raise my voice to do it. I let their own words hang in the air, recorded and undeniable. I let the facts speak where my heart had been ignored. And when the judge dismissed every lie they had rehearsed, I didn't smile. I just breathed. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it arrives in the form of clarity, in the moment you realize that you never needed their permission to be whole, that walking away isn't defeat, it's liberation. Judith lost her standing in the community not because I demanded it, but because she built her image on illusion. Brent was disbarred not because I wanted vengeance, but because he gambled with the wrong man's trust. And Elena, she found her way back not through guilt, but through truth. That, to me, was the real victory. People ask me if I'd take it all back, if I'd undo the years, if I'd erase the pain. But I wouldn't. Because in losing what I thought was love, I found something greater. Self-respect. I stopped waiting to be acknowledged and started living in a way that required no validation. Now, when I walk into my home, I no longer wonder if I'm enough. I no longer worry if I've given too much. I sit in a house that I built with my own hands and a heart that I rebuilt with my own strength. And when my daughter visits, she doesn't come to take. She comes to share. We laugh now. Not the nervous laughter of people avoiding truth, but the laughter of those who survived it. To the man or woman listening to this who feels invisible, who feels like their years of sacrifice have been reduced to footnotes, I want you to hear this. You are not forgotten. You are not foolish. You are not weak. Your worth does not depend on who notices. It lives in what you've endured, what you've overcome, and what you still have the courage to become. There is no shame in giving, but there is no virtue in allowing yourself to be drained dry. We teach others how to treat us by what we accept. And when we finally say, enough, we don't lose our family. We find the truth in who our family really is. Sometimes that means closing a door. Sometimes it means changing the locks. But always, it means choosing yourself. I no longer measure my life by who stayed or who left. I measure it by what I reclaimed. Peace, quiet mornings, laughter that isn't forced, and the comfort of knowing that no one owns my story but me. I didn't burn bridges, I built new ones. And I walk across them alone, not in bitterness, but in strength. The philosophy remains. Love is not measured by what you give up for others, but by what you're no longer willing to sacrifice to keep the wrong ones close. If you felt this story deep in your heart, if you've ever been taken for granted and rose above it, leave a comment below with the words, Number 1. Let the world know you stood up for your self-worth. And if you want to hear the next story about justice, redemption, and quiet strength, subscribe to our channel. We'll be here to remind you, your story matters. And it's never too late to reclaim the pen. Because the truth? Some endings are really just long overdue beginnings.